What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to make a video talking about the most slickest submission artist in UFC history, that being Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira. How has he developed a submission game? Did he go on that incredible 11-win streak or 10-win streak to ultimately gain the UFC title in the lightweight division, then going on to beat the likes of Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Beneil Dariush. He is one of the best fighters in UFC history and is going to be a UFC Hall of Famer undoubtedly. But I kind of want to talk today of how Charles Oliveira became the UFC slickest submission artist, and genuinely of what submissions are his favorite, what kind of he uses all the time, and talk about how Charles Oliveira uses his standing up game from his punches and his kicks to then transfer his fight to the ground to ultimately get different finishes there. Charles Oliveira has such a well-rounded game, and he's able to use that in multiple different categories, but he can use that well-rounded stand-up aspect to get that fight right down to the ground to where he really thrives in. But if you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to help the channel grow. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are always and furtherly notified about UFC content being released every single day. But without further ado, let's jump right into the video talking about how Charles Oliveira became the UFC's most highly prestigious submission artist ever. Charles Oliveira has developed himself within the UFC organization to become one of the best fighters. He kind of reminds me a lot of Max Holloway, someone who's been in the organization for a crazy long time. Charles Oliveira has been inside the UFC organization for over 14 years, with his first submission win coming against Darren Elkins on August 1st, 2010. But after that, Charles Oliveira has beaten some incredible names by submission. He's got Kevin Lee, Dustin Poirier, he's got Clay Guida, he's got Jeremy Stevens, and a lot of other individuals that he's kind of ran through with his submission game. Charles Oliveira is probably the best submission artist inside the organization. If you guys don't know exactly what a submission artist is, I know a lot of the more intense viewers, but to the casual fan who doesn't exactly know, you got a true grappler, wrestler who fights mainly for a position, namely someone like Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib wasn't necessarily the greatest quote-unquote submission artist, but inside the organization, you have these guys who are absolutely trained in being a submission artist. A kind of a poll out there, someone who's actually fighting this weekend, Paul Craig, an incredible submission artist, someone who lives off of his back to throw up different submissions. He's submitted Magomed Ankalaev and Jamal Hill, two of the best light heavyweights currently in the world, but genuinely, there is something about these fighters who can go in there and end the fight at any moment, and I kind of want to break down a couple of Charles Oliveira's different submissions in the game. I kind of want to start with the Dustin Poirier submission, kind of one more recent submission of his, where he was able to get the standing rear naked choke. So looking at this Poirier submission, Charles Oliveira starts round 3 by kind of pushing up Dustin Poirier against the fence, and when he does that, he kind of automatically transitions to the back. That allows Charles Oliveira to get Poirier's control within this aspect. As he's kind of there, he's kind of fighting for position, and if you notice real quickly, he wraps his right leg around Dustin's right leg, to then which he uses to gain a little bit of leverage to throw his left leg over Dustin's back. Obviously, this is an incredibly bad position and is kind of uncommon in the organization. You see a lot of different back takes when they're on the ground, a lot of triangles, a lot of different things that can happen from that position. But for you to get on someone's back as they're standing is not only incredibly hard for the person who is trying to get on their back, but it's also incredibly tough to deal with in every single circumstances, because Dustin Poirier is now going to have to carry Charles Oliveira's weight with him as well. Now, as this kind of further keeps going, you can see Charles Oliveira's legs kind of moving back and forth just to kind of get that position to make sure he doesn't fly over the top, just so nothing bad happens to him, considering that he is on Poirier's back. Now, he kind of, once he gets himself locked in on Poirier's body, he then starts moving in towards the submission. Obviously, here is a rear naked choke, kind of one of the more common submissions that you would see from something like this. I guess you could see a twister, you could see something a little bit different, but that would need for you to be fully on the ground, standing rear naked choke, kind of one of the biggest things or most common standing choke that you would see. But as Charles Oliveira kind of keeps going in there, he keeps applying pressure, fighting for the neck. Now, obviously, Dustin Poirier in this position is kind of panicking. You got one of the best submission artists in the UFC back on your neck, and this would be a very, very hard situation to go in and deal with. But honestly, Dustin Poirier started to do a very good job, because the one thing you have to do is fight the hands immediately. And Poirier was trying to do that in this aspect. But I think another fight that we got to go to is kind of like Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat got his arm right under Usman's neck, and as soon as that thing happened, Usman led forward, kind of throwing Khamzat back off his neck, something that could knock Usman out, but it's also something that saved him the fight and not getting finished in that first round. Now, in this position, I do think that Poirier needed to throw himself a little bit further, but he ultimately did it, which ultimately led to Charles Oliveira getting the submission in fully and tight. Now, the next recent submission I kind of want to go to is that fight against Justin Gaethje. This was also a rear naked choke, and this is a big submission that was used in the middle of the round. Ultimately, in this fight, Charles Oliveira hit Justin Gaethje, I believe, with a right straight right down the pipe, knocking Gaethje down. A lot of other fighters would go for ground and pound. They would go into a category where they're not kind of in their area. Charles Oliveira, though, assesses the situation, sees that Justin Gaethje is hurt, and then jumps on him with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A lot of fighters inside the organization that don't have a wrestling game behind them use their hands to get the fight to the ground to ultimately implement their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Someone like Brian Ortega is a big name. I know Aljamain Sterling has some wrestling game, but he also can sometimes do that. But genuinely, Charles Oliveira might be the best example, saying that he will go to the ground. If you're hurt or dropped, 9 times out of 10, he is 100% going to go and jump on the submission, which is what he did. He jumped automatically and took Justin Gaethje's back. Awful thing in this situation. I think he got the body lock, which is when you take one of your feet and you put it to the outside of your opposite knee. This really squeezes on the abdomen of the other individual that you're on the back of, and is really an uncomfortable time. Not only makes them panic a little bit, it's hard to breathe, it's hard to think, and when you have Charles Oliveira on your back, it's only amplified 10x. So Charles Oliveira is kind of in this position, and he automatically starts working to get that rear naked choke, which he actually gets in pretty quickly. But ultimately, Gaethje gets out of the first one, Oliveira rolls with him, and fully sinks in the rear naked choke with the second one. Charles Oliveira has so many different submissions in his arsenal. You could literally tell him to do anything, and I think Charles Oliveira would have the skills and the guts to go in there and do it. In this fight with Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300, he almost had 2 finishes by chokes. In the first round, he got an incredible guillotine choke on Arman Tsarukyan, and in the last round, he had a very, very good Darce choke to end the fight. Now, Arman Tsarukyan did a great job in defending both of those chokes. Charles Oliveira is a king at the guillotine too. He's also a great Darce choke expert. The guys who I think about Darce chokes are like old Dustin Poirier. Islam Makhachev beat Dustin Poirier by a Darce choke, and Kevin Holland has been getting a lot of Darce chokes lately. But I truly do think that being able to implement different strategies no matter what. You see Charles Oliveira thinking in his mind, what can he do? Can he do an arm triangle? Can he do a head and arm triangle off of his back? Can he do a twister? Can he do a guillotine? Can he do a Kimura? Can he do an arm bar? Charles Oliveira, you see all these things going through his mind. You watch Charles Oliveira on the ground, and he's thumbing through different pages of his submission book, and it's something incredible to see. Charles Oliveira has the most submissions in UFC history, with a combined 21 out of his 34 total wins coming by submission. An incredible feat that I don't think will ever be passed, considering how long Oliveira has been fighting, how hard it is to get a submission, and for him to go in there and do that against some of the greatest talent in the world, getting a submission over Dustin Poirier, almost submitting Tony Ferguson, beating Kevin Lee by submission. Charles Oliveira is really a guy in there who does everything he needs to. But Charles Oliveira has developed himself out of the ground to become one of the UFC's best submission artists, probably of all time. I don't see anyone coming very soon. And when Charles Oliveira gets your back, and when he gets mount, or when he does anything, you know it is going to be over soon, because he is an absolute finishing machine. Like I said, Charles Oliveira fights this weekend at UFC 309 versus Michael Chandler for the second time. An incredible fight. I cannot wait to see this go down. And if Michael Chandler wants to win this one, he's got to be very careful going to the ground with Charles Oliveira. Watch his back, and ultimately understand that Oliveira is a man who can finish the fight at any point in time. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know what you think down below in the comment section about Charles Oliveira's incredible submission game. Charles Oliveira easily is the most deadly submission artist in UFC history, and he can only keep that up over time as he keeps growing, even though he is a little bit older within the organization. He started from such a young age, and I do think he's still got a couple submissions left in the tank. Charles Oliveira knows how to thumb through all of his different submissions in his arsenal, depending on the situation, circumstance, and what he thinks is going to work best. Genuinely, Charles Oliveira has too many different things that he can do, whether it's going guillotine, triangle, arm body triangle, Kimura, armbar, all this different type of stuff, and genuinely it is something that is incredible to see. And that's why Charles Oliveira is a fan favorite amongst all fans, not because he just gets submissions, but also he gets knockouts as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the UFC content. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications, just so you guys are always and further notified about UFC content dropping and releasing every single day. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.